all know that a year ago, this facility opened. And it really was on the property where a small North Roseville Rec Center was built, a community center run by a small group of nonprofit community members trying to make sure there was access to kids for after-school programs. And it was run by just a threadbare budget, and we partnered with the Auburn Boys and Girls Club, and this is an amazing facility for our kids in these core neighborhoods, and actually that's what we're talking about. I'm going to share my perspective. We just had a presentation about DEI and why we're going to engage in our communities. And you're here in Roseville, and there's this program called Invest Health, and Debbie Odekant, who is with the Health Education Council, couldn't be here, so you're going to get a little bit more of me today. But why, when you think of Roseville, I bet you all think Roseville, white and rich.
Yeah.
Right? We think white and rich. Yes. And not everybody here is white and rich. And you're in the core neighborhoods of Roseville. Old Roseville, we're in the Roseville Heights neighborhood right now. We've got Thielsvander across the railroad tracks. And Roseville was a small community built around the railroad. And as the community built outward, right, in the suburban areas, moved to greenfield areas, folks who had less money moved into these small homes built in the 20s and 40s. And as Roseville focused on taking care of those new neighborhoods with more mellow roofs and bigger parks and lots of amenities, communities like this got ignored. Not really intentionally, but we only have so much capacity, and we were focusing on the growth. And so I share with you that this was sort of the forgotten neighborhood. And Invest Health Roseville came about. Debbie Odekant had an opportunity to get a grant for medium-sized cities in the United States. Roseville applied, and I was a part of the core team, along with then Mayor Garcia. I was part of Kaiser Permanente, also on the city council. And I thought, you know, it makes sense. Let's find out about the health inequities in our core communities. We know via data that in our older neighborhoods, obesity is higher, the asthma rates are higher because we've got a railroad going through. There are some health inequities. So as an elected, yes, let's go find out more. And I thought, great, we'll spend a couple years on this, we'll find the solution, one and done. It's been 6 years working on this process, but it has, I have to tell you, it has been really, really eye-opening for me. And I learned a lot. I learned, first of all, I got out of my comfort zone because I'm meeting with people throughout the country who are really addressing way bigger issues than the city of Roseville. Places like Hartford, Connecticut, where communities have a lot more disinvestment than we have here in Roseville. But it showed me that I need to start listening to people because their experiences are not my experiences. The residents here in the old part of Roseville, their experience is not my experience. And I needed to really slow down and listen and really take some time to listen and learn and put aside my perspective and try to hear more from residents in other communities and residents in my own community. So I want to share with you a couple things that I have learned in this 6 years process of focusing on the health needs of our community. Like I said, listening really, really matters. We often, as electeds, we think we know the answer. The data says this, or, you know, I think this community needs this. I think the residents need this park. I think the residents need this. And we think we know the answer. And then I found out when we started talking to the residents here in the core parts of the neighborhoods, what we thought and what the data said, it didn't match up. The data that we had for our Invest Health Roseville, we learned that this is a food desert. People can't easily walk to the grocery stores. We're like, great, we're going to solve the food desert problem. We started interviewing our residents. We had focus groups. We're talking to them in English and Spanish. We found out that's not really their issue. We have cars. We're California. They can get to the grocery store. They had bigger issues. They were concerned about safety in their neighborhoods. The lighting was bad, so they didn't feel safe. The parks weren't safe, so their kids couldn't go outside and play. The sidewalks, we had an issue with sidewalks this morning, right? Walking over here, there are not through sidewalks. Sidewalks are a problem if somebody has an accessibility issue. They're not all built through. And we found that our neighbors here had a very different perspective about what was important. And so as we were doing the Invest Health work, we realized we need to sort of refocus. We need to slow down and say, we're not going to just address the food desert. We're going to listen to our residents. We're going to take time to build relationships. The challenge is when people say, I'm from the government, I'm here to help you, people don't believe us, right? And they come, when government shows up, they're skeptical. We partnered with the Health Education Council, and we had the Health Education Council go and meet with the residents. Not Bonnie on the city council, not Mark Walensky from the city of Roseville. We had our trusted nonprofit community that had been working with our neighborhoods for a couple of years, building relationships. We had them help bridge that divide. And that made a big difference for them feeling like, we started that relationship, and then the reality is you've got to continue building the relationship and continue building the relationship, because it doesn't really work to just say, oh, I'm going to listen to you once and walk away, right? Because these residents care about their communities as much as we all care about our cities, right? They care, they live here. And so how about having them be a part of the solution? And so that's why we're having these conversations about DEI. It was very, I guess I'm hitting that unintentionally. It really has shown me that a community is successful, the entire community is successful when every portion of our community is doing well and is healthy. So Roseville, the greater Roseville benefits when I'm looking at the needs here in Old Roseville and saying, you know what, Weber Park really needs to be addressed. So I wanted to share that with you. I just really recognize as an elected, as I've gone through this process the last 6 years, I don't have the answer. My staff don't have all the answers. Government needs, and government doesn't do, as James would say, government sucks at doing community outreach. Right? We think, hey, I'm going to just check off the boxes. I'm going to do an email blast. Great, we got the answer. No, because you know what? My Spanish-speaking residents don't necessarily fill out those forms. Or they go online. They're busy working, right? So it's not just a check it off. It's really about how do we sit down and have coffee and talk to the moms in the parks and find out what matters to them. And so we've done that here in Roseville, but it translates, right, as we're talking about transportation investments. That's why we're talking about what we've learned here in Roseville, because you would not think that I would be a person saying, hey, this stuff matters, but I've seen that it matters in my community. And our council, as a result of this effort a couple of years ago, said, you know what, you're right, we've ignored the core neighborhoods, and we actually made it one of our city's strategic priorities, which is looking at investing in our core neighborhoods, making sure that we're looking at the lighting and the parks and the services for our community. So I have jumped around a little bit, but I think I hit what I wanted to say as an elected and what I have learned. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to flip through some of these things, and what's my time? Because I really want to make sure you hear from Pastor Evans. All right. Health Education Council. They are our nonprofit partner. They are in West Sac and Yolo County and Sacramento. They do a tremendous job, but their job, yes, to take care of the health, but really engage in the communities. Their focus is health, but they also are a cross-sector collaboration. They do resident engagement. They are a backbone entity. Like I said, they helped us do all this work because a nonprofit can be nimble. government is not nimble. Nonprofits can get grant funds, nonprofits can pivot very quickly. The rest of us, not so much. I mentioned we've been doing this since 2016, Invest Health, and it has been a process over many years, and that's been terrific for me because I've learned so much along the way during this process, and we have lots of highlights, but I'm going to move forward. There were 50 Invest Health cities. Roseville is one of 50 mid-sized cities that engaged in this work. See where they were at. We also spent time traveling to these other cities throughout the country: Henderson, Nevada, Denver, Philadelphia, Atlanta, different cities that had different concerns in their communities, but really a lot of the same issues. Disadvantaged communities that didn't feel connected, that didn't have necessarily a seat at the table when it came to planning their communities. We talked about how great Roseville is. There are some really good things, but as we've shared, the core neighborhoods have had some challenges. We mentioned the rail yards. It's been a huge impact on our city, for good and for some challenges. So I mentioned to you the Invest Health Roseville project. We started with data, we dug into data, and we learned we really had to listen to people. And as a result of some of that listening, we had to stakeholder meetings, etc. We realized that people said we have issues with safety, walkability, social connectivity. So when we changed our focus, one thing I've learned is sometimes you just have to pivot. When the data says one thing and the residents say something different, maybe we need to pivot. And so we've been talking about data. Data is great, helps inform, but there's also the practical application. And how do we balance those? So we did some things. We realized if we're going to come and invest and have these community engagement sections, we have to invest quickly and have some quick wins. We did neighborhood cleanups. We did park cleanups. And we gathered together to talk about what should Weber Park, which is right over, real close, right over here, a park that has visibility issues, where we had people who were homeless, sleeping, drug users in the park. A great park, but parents didn't feel comfortable bringing their kids to the park. And that was a challenge. How do we address that challenge? Roseville demographics, you'll see on this slide, the average household income is now $80,000 in Roseville. Roseville Heights, $33,000. So there's a big disparity. Diversity in Roseville may be 15% diverse, 58% diversity in our core neighborhoods. Unemployment rates, completely different. So you see, the data shows this area needs some attention. Skip that, I'm going to skip the work that we're doing, but really our vision is to make sure all of our community thrives with the investment in our core neighborhoods. And now I'm going to share with you some of the projects. We spent 6 years doing a lot of this work, and we have we did some really exciting things. We changed the lighting in the core neighborhoods, partnered with Roseville Electric. They were already going to change the lighting fixtures, old lights to LED fixtures. We said, you know what, how about if you start in our core neighborhoods first? People stopped Mayor Garcia in the grocery store and said thank you, because they felt safer walking to and from their cars at night because it was brighter. We partnered with our elementary schools. See someone? Yes. Please spend your money in our city. And he's hungry. And he's hungry. So I'll share this. One of the work that we did is we built partnerships with all of our nonprofits, with our business community, with our neighborhood associations. We worked to build partnerships. Because we built those partnerships, we were able to leverage and actually bring in a lot of money. and I'm going to show you some of that. We took $60,000 of investment for Invest Health Roseville, which was a grant, and turned that into over $8.7 million over the past 6 to 7 years. And that's lighting, that was improved park facilities, neighborhood watch signs, got Union Pacific to pay some money for some neighborhood watch signs that the neighborhood wanted. We had breakfast forums that our healthcare partners shared in some sponsorships. Mental health awareness grants from our partners from Kaiser Permanente. Different collaboration grants continuing this work with the folks from Invest Health. Air pollution control district dollars, more money from Kaiser Permanente, et cetera, a lot of dollars. Probably one of the biggest wins was we've been focusing on what to do with our park. The city of Roseville announced that they were going to invest $3.3 million in Weber Park. And in addition, we have a pool on the other side of the tracks, Johnson Pool. They put in $400,000 to do some upgrades, but now they're going to do another $3.7 million of a complete renovation of a pool in the old part of town that's been there since the 1920s. But that's one of the few recreation opportunities for the kids in that neighborhood. So that's Debbie. Do you have any questions? But I'm excited that I have learned a lot in this journey. And I want to share with you now, I'm going to have Pastor Messiah Evans share with you. He is the pastor of the Methodist Church. We just mentioned, many of us parked over there. And when he came to Roseville during COVID, he's like, what can we do? How do I engage my congregation, which is an older congregation, here into the community? And he does an excellent job of that, so I'm going to pass it over to Pastor Evans.
Are we in the morning still? How do y'all feel? Good. Well, good morning and peace to you. My name is Reverend Messiah Evans, and I'm pastor over at First United Methodist Church in Roseville. First Church, as it's known, because it is the first church in the Roseville area, and we send you greetings. And you know, I'm going to be honest, right? We were looking at our time, and we're like, well, you know, this is going questions, land. There was, you know, market stuff. Things were happening. Questions were being asked, right? And I was like, man, we're going to close out with the black preacher?
Yes.
I'll try to be brief. No, I will be brief. Because a lot of the things have already been said. What I'm going to kind of talk about is how we are an example of how the things that we've talked about, collaboration and listening, how that works. But before I do that, I just wanted to offer this because I was in the back and I was able to kind of see a whole lay of the room. And I was really grateful for the work that you do. I think sometimes, especially people who work with government don't hear that enough. They don't hear just like, thank you. And I'm standing here not only as a community member, but I'm standing here as a partner, as someone who recognizes and is representative of churches and other community-based organizations who doesn't see government only as an impediment or an antagonist or an agitator, but also as an active collaborator, and that we have shared missions, right? And so I just wanted to say thank you. And there's a verse within the Hebrew scriptures that comes to mind. It's Psalms 133. It says, how good and how pleasant it is to see our siblings coming together in unity. So that's what I just wanted to express first off. The other thing I want to do is, if you can just take a breath with me. Just take a deep breath. It's been a long day. And I like that word breath because, you know, to respire, to breathe means that we are in one accord with this thing that is giving us life. And I love this word conspire Because if you look at the root of the word conspire, it's those you are breathing with. And for the last 2 hours, we've been breathing with, in the same room, people who are of like-minded, caring about the communities that we serve. So I wanted to offer that up. I also want to say that I was very impressed with the racial equity statement that was provided by me to Rosie and others, that acknowledges, and we talked about the inequities and disparities that are within this community and other communities represented by within the Sacramento area, and how you talked about committing to building a thriving economy and a healthy environment for all the residents in the Sacramento region. And particularly, I always look for like mission statements type things, because I believe that those aren't just like things that we write on paper. I believe that we breathe life into them. And you said you envision a Sacramento region where race is no longer a predictor of life outcomes, and outcomes for all people are improved. All people. And I love that. And as I read through the document, one of the things that moved me the most is when you said that you desire to increase engagement with, invest in, and strengthen ties with those in the community who we are seeking to serve, so to speak. And I believe that's important because change and lasting impacts happen when we are in relationship with each other and we are listening and learning. There was something else that's talked about how you are committed to build and strengthen relationships with organizations representing historically marginalized communities in both urban and rural areas, to integrate their perspectives and priorities, and to give voice to these communities. And this speaks to not only listening, but a consistent commitment to building community and relationships. And this is why I love the type of collaboration that we had, our church, with Invest Health in Roseville. Because not only do I share its vision of a healthier community that is created by the improvements in economic and social well-being, but I share in its commitments to do that work by listening to folks and building relationships with people. And in my organization, my church, and other churches like mine, is important because it facilitates the needed listening and community building in order to make a lot of those mission statements that we have on our papers become a reality. So I'm going to use my church as an example, because this is not theoretical. As was said earlier, it's the first church. First Church was the first church in Roseville, some 140 years ago. Again, as Mayor Bruce said, this was before there were even, cars, right? So people got off the train, oftentimes, travelers, and where did they go? They would go to this building that you see right here, which is still built, still up the road. And why would they go there? They'll go there in order to find a sense of community. They might even go there to get a hot meal, which happened, or they'll find a job. Where's the jobs? Or where can I find a home? But more than anything, beyond listening and praying and worshiping, hopefully, it was a place where people gathered to listen to each other and listen to each other's needs, right? And so 140 years later, the context of old Sacramento has changed drastically. The challenges are different. Right now, we're dealing with the racial inequities and the disparities. We're struggling with those who are dealing with being unhoused, struggling with addictions and mental health challenges. There are people who are dealing with immigration issues. And all of us know that we're in this bigger macro environment where it's pulsing with the petulance and the pettiness of our politics, which animates a type of angst, right? Angst that gives voice to the type of divisions and distractions and type of things that tend to divide us. So it's hard to do this work. And there's a spiritual that says, sometimes I feel discouraged and I feel like my work is in vain. And I know that some of us in this room, as is true for me, you're pushing back against all of these challenges, right? And you can just be like, ooh, this is supposed to be 2 years, now it's 6. Things have gotten better, but now it seems like 2 steps are back. I can't even have good conversations with my colleagues. I feel discouraged and I feel like my work is in vain. Maybe I'm just talking to myself, right? But like spring, hope arrives in the form of building community. When we listen to each other, when we together come together and say, we're going to make an impact on people's lives, not just for them, but with them. And these lessons, if you could go to the next thing, these lessons came to bear during the pandemic, when we opened up our doors again. And as Bonnie said, we tried to figure out what can we do to help the community that we love. And it came very practical. This is when the vaccines started coming online. They said this community needs more access to the vaccines for COVID to be able to thrive again. Because we all know what happened during the pandemic. And so we raised our hands and we said yes. And so the beautiful thing happened. All these groups came together, right? Health Education Council, there was county and city officials. We all gathered and we had a big event in December of 2021. Santa was there was elves, there was workshops, there was kids, there were, incentivizing cards. There was a lot of people who came through and got their vaccine shots, and it filled up all of the spaces of our social halls in our church. But as you remember, the first vaccines needed to have a double dose. So we had this big event, and it was great. And then we were like, oh, okay, well, everybody has to come back in 4 weeks. So let's do it again. And so we did it again, and this time more people came, and we started setting up booths so people can be able to access maybe some of the things that they needed. And other organizations like the Latino Leadership Council and Child's Advocates came, and they set up, because if people are going to be in here, then this is a place where people are gathering. Maybe this is a place where we can listen to people and their needs. And this continued to happen, and it developed this thing called Fourth Fridays. So every fourth Friday we had this resource fair. But we didn't stop listening. So we listened some more. What the people were saying was, we love having access to the tables, and we love getting all of this swag, and we love some of the games that you set up. But part of what it means to be thriving as a community has to do with our social well-being as well. Can we have a place where we can celebrate the histories of this community? If you can see this next picture. So what happened is we began to have themed events around Fourth Fridays. You have the next one?
I guess not. No, I do. She does.
Okay, this is beautiful. And this was our Dia de los Muertos celebration. And what you don't see, like around there, we still had the tables and a resource fair, but the community was able to gather and culturally celebrate themselves and their culture, because they began to have a sense of belonging around what was happening. So it was this beautiful thing that now, and even right now, every fourth Friday, we have this time when we come together where we are collaborating, when we are listening more, and the community is growing and getting healthier and vital. There's a practical reason why this is important too. Because now our collaborators are saying, because we're not just listening to the people, but the people are listening to our collaborators, and we said, well, what is needed now? Well, this space, we need an AV system, because we can't talk over all of the scrum, all the people. And so our partners from Child's Advocates put together a grant that we did with Union Pacific, and we have state-of-the-art AV system now in that social hall that I'm hoping many of you will be able to see after this meeting. And so you'll see that there's a lot of times, there's a lot of resources, but we are not able to connect the resources to the needs. And churches are a place where we can find that middle ground, and so that the resources can get there in a way that is expedient and efficient. I have one more thing that I wanted to say before we close. Go to the next and last picture. Yeah, this is a church. Collaborative work based on listening not only applies for successful outcomes, those things that can be measured, but it combats the despair that I kind of talked about earlier. It reminds us that we are not alone, that we are not by ourselves, that we are connected, and that we are interdependent. I believe it was Dr. King, he said it best when he says that all people are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. King goes on to say that this is the interrelated reality of life itself. And I believe that community is not just some static end or a goal or a noble destination. I believe that community is a verb. I believe that community is a way of being. I believe that community is a way of how we do what we do. It is a way of seeing ourselves as stakeholders in each other's thriving. It's to see that we have mutuality, that we have each other's successes at stake. It's to bring life to what Dr. King says when he said that we are caught within this inescapable network of mutuality. Community is the beating heart of collaboration. And Coretta Scott King often said, she said, the greatness of a community is most accurately measured by the compassionate actions of its members. So yes, on paper, and you'll see this on paper, we'll say and define goals with stuff like, the focus is Roseville's downtown core neighborhoods. We're seeking to define community needs and investment challenges, to devise solutions and to align investment capitals and other resources and policies to address the social detriments of health. That sounds familiar, right? That's what it sounds like on paper here in Roseville and on paper in the 6 county areas of Sacramento. But in truth and in spirit, what we are doing is being community and furthering a legacy of hope by listening, by being in active relationship with each other, and by being committed to compassionate actions. And I am so very grateful that even when the road gets rough and we begin to get weary, and in an environment where we're beset by bad and crazy news going on all the time, when we begin to feel discouraged, like as the spiritual says that our work is in vain, we can do what we can do right now. We just take a look around the room. Take a look and see each other. And know that you are not alone. That you're doing this work with people who care just as much as you care. For people who are just as worthy of having the best as any one of us. John Lewis, and I'll close with this, he says, if you come together with a mission and it's grounded with love and a sense of community, you can make the impossible possible. And that's what the business we're in. We're in the business of making the impossible possible. Thank you.